Hello and welcome to another 3ABN Today program. Thank you for joining us as you do each and every day. And we want you to know that Jesus loves you, and so do we. And we also thank you for your love and your prayers and financial support of 3ABN as we continue to endeavor to take this gospel of the kingdom into all the world. And Jesus said, "Go ye into all the world." And that's exactly 3ABN thanks to you on 10 satellites. It's literally encompassing planet Earth. And if you want to watch from almost anywhere on planet Earth, inhabited continents, you may. You can do it through internet, you can do it through radio, you can do it through satellite, you can do it through so many means, UHF stations, through your cable, through Dish Network, and it just goes on and on. But because of you and your dedication to getting the three angels' messages into all the world, 3ABN is out there as a force bringing the gospel to the world. And the reason that we have a network is not just so we can get up and look pretty, as they say in this part of the country, look pretty or get up and tell you how much we know. It has nothing to do with any of that. The Lord said, take the gospel of the kingdom into all the world. So there's many facets to that. It can be teaching, can be preaching, can be music, can be all of the above and much more. And one of the things that we love to do is share truth, God's word. And he says, if I be lifted up from this earth, will draw all men unto me. And so today, I have a special friend that I've known for, won't be too long, it'll be 30 years, 27, 28 years, and today we have Dr. Walter Thompson. Dr. Thompson, it's good to have you here.
It's neat to be here.
And you're not a guest by any means, you're a family.
I'm a guest.
And 27 years ago, when the Lord had impressed me to build a station to reach the world, I had gone to, was invited to go to Hinsdale Sanitarium up there, the Hinsdale Church in close to Chicago, Illinois, and I spoke, and George Vandeman had just found out about 3ABN, what we were wanting to do. We really weren't all there yet, and to our surprise, he said, well, I'll come out and be there. And so he out and spoke and was very favorable to 3ABN, and so word started getting around that we're building this network. And then sometime later, I got a letter in the mail, and it was from a man named Dr. Walt Thompson. And, you know, our gifts at that time were $100 or $50. And, Doc, you probably don't remember it, but it was a check for $5,000.
I remember.
Do you? Okay.
It was a gamble.
Yeah, it's a gamble. So everything in life's a gamble, right? So, but you said, and I forgot exactly how you worded it, but the thought you put across was, it's worth it. In other words, if this appears to be, we do need station to reach the world, and I'm willing to put some money into it.
It was no gamble, Dan. You know, for years I've been praying to God, how is this going to happen? And when I saw that vision, when you told me the vision, I mean, it just opened up to me.
Yeah, wow.
And no, it was no gamble. It was an opportunity.
But you had no idea what you'd be getting into, because then later you become a board member of 3ABN for a number of years, and then after that, at one point, you changed from, I'm going to say, just a board member to chairman of the board. You were chairman of the board for how many years?
12 or 13.
Yeah, at least 12, 13 years as chairman of the board. And Dr. Walt, I want to thank you on behalf of the people and behalf of the rest of our board and supporters of 3ABN for the tremendous work. And you went through, you've gone through a lot of things personally when you're up front. You're in the firing line. And so, you know,
the price you pay, but it's worth it.
Well, you know what? I believe the same thing. Yeah. Because people, anytime you're up front, they're going to throw all kinds of darts at you. They're going to do everything. And it really only makes spiritual sense, because the devil hates to see the gospel get to the world.
That's right.
So if you're involved in a ministry that's getting the gospel to the world, and you're having people or associating you with any of that, then you become a target of Satan. And so the devil tries to do, but you've never been discouraged. You stick in there. You have written probably hundreds, if not thousands, of letters to people if they have concerns and they whatever, and you've spent many, many years basically defending the faith, not just me or 3ABN or board members or workers, but defending the faith that God is who He says He is, and that He's created us. He's coming back to take us home with Him. And He says, while you're there, you occupy. While you're there, you preach the gospel to all the world. So Walt has not only been a champion of this ministry, but he's been a champion for the Lord. You traveled with Mark Finley for a number of years. Tell us about that.
Well, we've taken quite a few trips together. I think the first one, well, we went to Israel. Mm-hmm. And he was giving a tour of Israel, He was living in Chicago area at the time, and we knew them pretty well. And I really had never had any desire to go to Israel for reasons I don't know. I just never did. But they talked us into it, kind of, and it was a real experience. I mean, I really enjoyed being in some of those places where Jesus walked and walking in those same steps. And it was altogether different than what I had anticipated. And then while we were there, we got to talking about, well, one of the discussions we had, still haven't gone, we're going to come back to Israel and give a series.
Okay.
It hasn't been done yet. But anyway, we were talking about, well, and soon after that, he was working in Eastern Europe. And so at the time when communism was falling, we went to Poland together and did a series of meetings in Poland, Gdańsk, and it was just, that was just a neat opportunity to speak to the people who have been suppressed for so long under communism and to be able to present the gospel to them. And then a couple years after that, we went to Moscow and did some work there a couple times, and then from there, other places. It was just a neat experience.
Okay, and what did you do? You're not a preacher per se, so what did you do to help with the evangelism?
Well, I'll tell you, the first night in Poland, first lecture they had there, I gave a health talk, and my turn came first, for 10 minutes. Well, I went on talking for about 45 minutes.
Oh, no.
And you can imagine what Mark was doing. So I learned from that, and I learned to curtail my remarks. But no, it was great. And I gave a health talk, and we went out into the community and met with some of the physicians, and some of the caregivers, and some of the schools, gave talks at schools and stuff. And it made I think, a significant impact in the city. A couple years later, we went to Katowice and we met with the I don't know if it was the mayor or whoever was there, and we got a discussion about, well, smoking was a big problem, and they couldn't quit smoking, but they were scared to death of the arsenic and heavy metals that were in the soil, so they wouldn't eat the potatoes and carrots that were growing around there, and which were minimally a problem compared to the smoking.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
So we had some good discussions.
Oh, that's great. And it's interesting you say you talk for so long because you don't consider yourself a talker, but when it comes to health and healthy lifestyle and living and bringing the Lord into all of that, that's when you seem to light up. And
well, that's
your passion.
That's
really.
Passion, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And so we appreciate all the work that you do and the travel around the world, and you've done for 3ABN also and traveled all over. And so thank you. Once again, on behalf of all the folk, we appreciate you so much. You're also an author. Some folk may not know that. Today, in a few moments, we're going to be discussing a beautiful little book put out by Pacific Press, God's Gift in Time. And so we're going to be talking about this today. And I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but I went through it this morning, and it's beautiful. You're coming across with some just, I think, very helpful information. I'm going to call it good information, maybe even beautiful. It's a different way of approaching this timely subject, but we're going to come back to it in just a moment, because right now we have a lovely young lady who's going to be singing for us, and this happens to be my niece, Valerie Walker, and she's going to be singing My Tribute. Amen. Thank you, Valerie. Talking about someone that says they're not really a talker. Valerie says, well, I'm not really a talker. I'm not a person to get up front. And you've kind of seen yourself that way. But see, when God's in it and He's in control, you find yourself sometimes going places and talking and doing things you never thought you might ordinarily do.
Danny, when I was in high school, I was so introverted, so bashful, that I could not associate with the people there. I mean, at noontime, there was nothing going on. I'd stand in a corner with another guy who was like myself, just standing there for the whole hour.
Really?
I mean, this is how
now why?
difficult it was. I mean, I
why?
don't know. I was just afraid, I
My
guess.
personality is different. That would never enter my mind.
Well,
wherever the party was, that's where I usually was.
And I struggled with it until, I still struggle, but I struggled with it until I was in Battle Creek. I was working in Battle Creek, and they signed me up for a Dale Carnegie course.
Oh, really?
And I took the Dale Carnegie course, and it gave me a different perspective on myself and on the role of life, and
wow.
And it really it opened me up a lot. Otherwise,
maybe I should take one. I wouldn't be so bashful. Maybe if I took.
Well, it might help you there.
Probably could help in a lot of ways. I don't think I want to know now. It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, so we just kind of at this rate, you just keep going, whatever.
But that was a real blessing to me, and
yeah.
And I think the director of social work up there knew what was needed, worked it out.
Now, you were a surgeon at Hinsdale Sanitarium and Hospital. Were you chief of surgery for a while?
Yes, I was for a couple of years there.
Yeah.
And I was chief of staff at Bethany Hospital for a few years, so down in the city. But
I know we had a number of our own staff you've operated on over the years.
I've
A lot
touched
of our own folk. You've been a blessing to us, but you also been a blessing spiritually. And I've said this, and I'll say it probably as long as the Lord gives me breath. You know, I've met a lot of people, meet thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, and not everyone individually, but I go places, but I've met thousands of people in my life. And if I had to put down on one hand the people who've had the biggest impact on me that I look at is someone as a spiritual leader, Dr. Thompson was one of those. And so I mean that because I've seen your life and I appreciate you. So I'm not trying to embarrass you or brag on you, but the Jesus in you is.
I appreciate it, Danny. I mean, you know that I feel the same way about you. So.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you know, it's amazing how God takes people from nowhere.
Yeah.
And allows them to work for Him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was born and raised on a farm, dairy farm up in central Wisconsin. When I was a little kid, we were. You know, we had outside by the barnyard. There were some flowers that grew out there in the summertime, the daisies, little white daisies, and we used to go out there, my brothers and sisters, and pick those daisies and pick the petals off. He loves me not. He loves me, loves me not.
Yeah.
And still, I want to drive along the road and see some of those daisies. I'm tempted to do the same thing. But anyhow, that was kind of what started this book.
Yeah.
Does God love me, or does He not love me?
Oh, okay. All right.
And this is the struggle with most people in this world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do we really have a God? Is there really a God up there who cares? And a lot of us profess it. I mean, a lot of Christians, you know, get all excited when things are right, but what happens when things go wrong? And we yell and scream and where are you, God? And you know, all kinds of situations. So it's really a struggle for life. Does God love me? Is He real? And that anyway. So
all of us is that, all of us, and it hit me, and it probably will for a while, and I won't go into the whole story, but Yvonne Lewis and I were invited to Whitney Houston's funeral just recently, and we attended the funeral, and then after what they call a repast, where there's only 100 or so people who are closer friends and what have you, but her bodyguard spoke at her funeral. And he talked about her love for the Lord, but the struggles, and other people did too. And it's not a secret. Yvonne knew her well, and actually, you know, attended her 18th birthday party. So she's known the family and very good friends with Sissy, the mother, for over 30 years. But he talked about, and the different people talk about her struggle, you know, wanting to be a Christian and fighting that battle. And so sometimes, you know, all of us is, well, does God really love me? How can He love me because I'm not doing what He wants me to do? But he said these words I thought was so powerful. The day before, I think she died there at Beverly Hilton, he said that he was talking to her and she was very discouraged and down. But she said this, but because He lives, I can face tomorrow.
Yeah.
So she made that decision. Yes, God's gift was not in vain. Here's called the gift in time here, but God's gift of salvation was not in vain. And because He lives, I can face tomorrow. It's a Bill Gaither song that he actually wrote. And so all of us, I don't care who you are, and at the top of the world, you may look like you're at the very top of the world, you struggle with the same things, Dr. Walt, that you did as a little boy in central Wisconsin picking up the daisies. Does He love me? Does He love me not? So everybody does it. And the last time that Yvonne said she talked to Whitney, she said, you know, boy, you've come a long ways in the last 30 years. And she said, it's just not what it's cracked up to be. It's not what you think, what people think it is. So all of us, no matter who we are, we see these people, we think they're so successful, they've got it all together. We all are human beings. We all are in need of a Savior. And it's just a matter of seeing, you know, who we are and who He is, and then being able to make that decision and to say, because He lives, I can face tomorrow.
Princess Diane. I started the book out with her.
Okay.
Everybody in the world, when she died, everybody identified with her. I mean, why? I mean, what did she have? And yet she had probably the best of everything, what everybody would like. and yet she had the worst of everything, which we experience. And I don't know, something about that allowed old mothers, old women, young women, young guys, old men, everybody loved Diana. And why? And again, this is a struggle we're talking about, the struggle between good and evil, and what is the meaning of life?
Wow.
And to me, Sabbath, is what this book is about, is the answer to that.
Well, how in the world would the seventh-day Sabbath, you're talking about seventh-day Sabbath, how would that have any effect on the answers to people's life? I mean, somebody's going to say, that's a far stretch, Dr. Walt.
Probably it is, but it makes a good book. No, it doesn't. I mean, what is Sabbath anyway? Why do we have Sabbath?
Why do we?
I'm going to ask you. I mean, this is an exchange here.
Oh, I thought I was interviewing you. The Sabbath, and I'll just tell you what it means to me, and it hit me one day. Why do we need a Sabbath? And God wasn't tired. He didn't have to rest on the seventh-day Sabbath. And why couldn't he have made us where we can go 7 days a week? I mean, he really could have. He says, well, you need the seventh day to rest. Okay, you're asking me, so here you're going to get my little answer, okay? Why do you need the seventh day to rest? Because if God could make us to go for 6 days to work, why didn't he just make us to work for seventh day? That's no big deal for him. We should never get tired. And here's what it occurred to me. Because we are so self-centered because of sin. After sin entered the world, people are so self-centered that if we just think about ourselves 7 days a week, we'll forget about God. And we'll forget about who he is and who we are, because we start succeeding in life, or we start doing this, or we start doing that. And I think the Sabbath, every Sabbath, brings us back to creation, to who we are and to who God is. Get away from all of the things that we're focused on during the week. And now let's remember, lest we get, my dad used to say, son, you're as independent as a hog on ice. Unless we get too independent and think we can make it. You're looking at me, they probably hadn't heard that one before. But
your dad had a lot of good sayings today.
yeah, he did. People said, you ought to write down some of your dad's saying, put that in a little book for us. But the idea is we get too independent. And so for me, I mean, the Sabbath, one of the reasons is so we'll go back every week and remember who we are and who God is. He's the creator. We're just dust in his breath.
It's interesting. You go through the Old Testament, and what do you see Israel doing? Every time Israel loses track of the Sabbath, they go off to the world and start worshiping idols. They lose God. And every time when they get drawn back, then they prosper.
Yeah, that's true.
And over again through the scriptures it happens. And Abraham Heschel, I think that's his name, the Jewish theologian. I'm not sure he originated with him, but he called the Sabbath a monument in time. We have monuments everywhere. You were in Russia. You were in Poland. Russia.
Yes.
I don't know about,
Sure.
Poland.
I've been in Poland too. Yeah.
And what did you see there?
Of course, monuments to people,
you saw monuments
to everything.
You saw signs over the highways and bridges, and all kinds of flags and banners. And why? Why do we have monuments?
Well, because it's bringing attention and focus to people, especially like these communist leaders. They wanted to make sure no one ever forgot who they were, and they wanted them to look at them as someone special, and never forget who you are, and don't forget who I am. Here, I'm going to be in stone forever,
But it does more than that, doesn't it? It also creates community. In other words, it's not just exalting them, it's not just remembering the past, but it's an opportunity to bring people together into community and unity. And that's what God wants from his people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I never thought about it that way.
So Sabbath is really a monument, and it's like a banner, like a flag, all different kinds of things that we use to memorialize. But like anniversaries. Why anniversaries? Why do we have a wedding anniversary or birthday anniversary? And we celebrate on that day. It's not an anniversary. We don't. And just having it in the book is not good enough. We actually celebrate it. So the Sabbath is a monument that we celebrate.
Okay. So from your studies, the Lord said, okay, he created 6 days. You believe it's 6 day literal creation week?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. I mean, you're a smart guy. You didn't become a surgeon just by not being too smart. But so many people say, oh, it took, the Earth's been here hundreds of millions of years, and God didn't do this. That's a figure of speech. It did it over millions of years.
See, if they had an answer, I mean, if millions of years did that, that'd be great. But nobody's been able to show that happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no evidence for it. And it takes at least as much faith to believe in that as it does to believe in a God who's been... I mean, I can't understand, can't even begin to conceive eternity or infinity. Mm-hmm. I can't look out at the universe and see. We can look out in the universe with telescopes way beyond 10 billion light years, and there's nothing beyond. I mean, there's still stuff beyond that. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that. No. So it's there.
It takes less faith, I think, to believe in God than it does in evolution.
Yeah, I mean,
because the difference for me is, Dr. Walt, I know God is real because He lives in my heart. I've seen nothing to convince me evolution is for real. The theory, and I'm going to go back to it started out a theory, and that's all it is. It's some man's ideas, but they're just bogus. I mean, that's all there is to it. But once you experience a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, you have no doubt. So it takes very little faith for me to believe this. One time I interviewed or took a guy to Russia, but he came here during the 1990s, a good friend of ours. And anyway, he said to me one time, "You all have shaken my faith in atheism." I had never heard that expression before.
Bob is a good thinker.
Well, but I'm saying, that's really true. To me, to believe in God is much easier to believe there's a creator God who created this universe than it all just happened.
Well, Danny, when one has seen as many miracles as we've seen here with 3ABN,
yeah.
I mean, how can you can't deny that.
Yeah, I know.
Take the word love. Mm-hmm. There's no place for love in atheism. I mean, there's no, it's not built into it.
Right. Okay.
But what would this world be like without love?
Yeah, there'd be
I mean, we wouldn't function. We couldn't live, and that has to be. God is the only source for that.
Yeah, that's neat. And I just you wrote this book. I wrote a little song last week and just recorded it. It says love rules. It's for children. Yeah. It says, isn't it cool that love rules? Isn't it great? There's no hate where love rules. It's not an accident, you see. That's the way it's meant to be. Since God is love, love rules. And that's what we're talking about. Without love, you don't have anything.
I mean, look at the places in this world where love is not present now. Yeah. I mean, we have anarchy. We have all kinds of. I mean, human life could not exist without love.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true.
And to me, that's a terrifically strong argument against atheism and for God.
Sure. Okay. So your book title, God's Gift in Time. So let's get into that. How do you figure that's His gift in time?
Well, anything that's that good, Danny, is a gift. I mean something that will tie the human race together, that will lead us to that only source of life, which is Christ and which is love. I mean, and I believe the Sabbath does that. I believe the Sabbath is a thing. In the Christian world, there's the argument that the Sabbath has been done with, that the Sabbath is done away with the cross, at the cross. I can't make that connection because this to me the Sabbath, the cross points to the Sabbath. It establishes the law, the validity of the law. And where is the Sabbath in the law? It's right in the central. I mean, right in the middle of the commandments. You got the 4 commandments to love God, and the 6 for man. And the Sabbath is there that connects the two together. If we've got love for God, God will change us and instill that love into men.
So you don't see it's just a command that God is testing His people. He needs to just say, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. These 10 commandments, I've heard people say, oh, they're just, written on the hard, cold tables of stone, and there's this God up there looking down at you and saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to torture you forever.
Well, unfortunately, Danny, this is the view that the Jews had at the time Jesus was here. And this is the view that most of the Christian world has today.
Really?
And this is why we get rid of them. I mean, why we get rid of the Sabbath, because it's a law that we have to do. If you look at the 10 Commandments as any law, I mean, you look at the natural laws, the physical laws. I mean, we go to the moon, we go to this Mars, we go to all around this universe obeying physical laws.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual laws are no different. I mean, they're all created by God. They all have the same, they all have a function. And if we live within those laws, we're blessed. We live. Without them, life doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And Sabbath is a spiritual law, is all the commandments. And if we keep those, we're blessed. We have the advantages of them. Mm-hmm. I've got a paragraph in the book that suggests that Sunday keepers may have trouble getting to heaven.
Oh, my goodness.
And I debate a little bit about it, because I really believe that there are many Sunday keepers today that love the Lord as much and more than I do, and are really close to Him. But I do believe that the Sabbath gives us an opportunity.
You're just a button pusher. You're trying to push buttons to people to get us, agitate us a little bit and get us thinking, I think. That's what you're doing.
Well, that's fun to do.
Because I know you well. Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, I really think that, well, we know at the end of time we're going to be drawn into those who love and who don't love God. I mean, there's going to be a separation between the two. And I believe that Sabbath is really significant from that perspective. But Sunday keepers today, I mean, there are many that are better Christians than I am. I mean, I work with a lot of them, and they're just neat people. But I believe that we as Adventists, and 3BN certainly has the obligation and the privilege and honor of sharing this Sabbath news with that world.
Sure.
And that's a big burden in my life.
No different than, Walt, no different than you as a physician. Though you're a surgeon, you don't just believe in prescribing drugs and, helping your patients when they come in. You are giving them, you teach them healthy lifestyle. Don't eat things that are bad for you. Don't smoke things that are going to ruin your lungs. Don't do these things. You don't look at it as like, you're not presenting it as, well, there's this law that God's got, this physical law, and you better not eat pork, and you better not smoke, and you better not drink. You're saying you feel privileged.
Yeah.
You feel privileged to be able to share them information. They're wonderful people, but maybe they don't realize that much of what they're doing is bringing on their own demise. And you're saying that's the same way with the Sabbath. You're sharing to wonderful people who love the Lord, but you're sharing some beautiful truths that might help them and be a blessing in their life.
The same truths that have been standard throughout history, among God's people, they've been lost to a large degree to the Christian world and to the rest of the world. And yes, I think we have an obligation, an opportunity to bring these back.
Why do you think, and I didn't spend, you spent a lot of time in educational system. I didn't spend very long in the educational system, but I was around some folk that had some common sense. So I think sometimes if we can put the two together, but people who think somewhat logical, but in my little mind, why do you think it is that most of the Christian world, as we know today, believe that you need to keep 9 commandments? See, when they say, they say the commandments were nailed to the cross.
Right, right.
But in reality, they don't.
I've been in email conversation with a former Adventist the last few weeks who claims that the fourth commandment, the Sabbath commandment, is a Jewish law. And it started with Moses. Now, I can't find anywhere in the Bible where it says that. To me, the Sabbath was created at creation, at the end of the creation week, and this is that's the beginning of it. But some way, looking at the writings of Paul in Galatians and so forth, they come to the conclusion that the Sabbath is done away with, it, which doesn't make sense. I mean, if this is a monument, if this is a monument of time, if this is a time that God has set aside from His busy activities to be with us, as a special time to celebrate and to communicate with us and to draw us to Him and us to Him, He to us. I mean, how can you get rid of that?
Well, God doesn't get rid of it. In other words, He gave us 10 commandments. And so I tell people, either they're all done away with or they're all valid, right? I mean, doesn't that make sense? The common sense of it is, if God gives you 10, if He just wanted to give you a list of commandments, then He could just throw it out and didn't put an emphasis. But we emphasize there are 10 commandments, but in the Christian world, we just say, well, we're just going to keep 9. And it makes no sense, because why is it that people don't want to keep the fourth commandment? I mean, people say, okay, I love the Lord, Thou shalt have no other gods. I don't have any other gods before him. I won't take the Lord's name in vain. You know, I won't bear false witness. I won't steal. I won't kill. I believe that's all those things are wrong. I believe in honoring my father and mother. These are, in fact, signs just 3 or 4 years ago, and all over southern Illinois, and I'd drive around the country out there, the 10 Commandments, people begin to put them in their yards. But those same people are still saying, well, we don't believe
calling 10-9 or calling 9-10.
Yeah, and so I really was tempted. I thought, you know, wouldn't it be interesting to have up the 10 Commandments, have a sign made up, and then put X out the fourth commandment, you know, on the seventh-day Sabbath, because people, so I'm wondering if there's a way to help people to put 2 and 2, connect the dots. Yeah. Either all of the commandments were nailed to the cross, or none of them were. And so the truth of it is, the commandments, people don't like to be, I wish that King James could have given us something instead of calling them 10 Commandments. I've said this before, and the Bible writers, we could have called them 10 promises. Yeah. And God promises that if we love him and we submit and commit our life to him, he'll give us victory over sin in our lives. He'll give us victory over killing, stealing, adultery, lying, you know, cheating, all of these things that he promises a blessing to us. So all of the commandments are a blessing. If God thought the Sabbath were going to be, and knew the Sabbath would be nailed to the cross and the rest of them, he probably would have just said, here's 9, here's one I want you to keep till the cross. But he didn't. And then it makes it a little more complicated, Dr. Walt, because in Isaiah 66 it says, talks about the future after sin is done away with, and it says, from one Sabbath to another shall all flesh, talking about in heaven, come to worship before me, saith the Lord of hosts. So why are we still keeping a Sabbath in heaven?
What role has the devil played in all this? What is his day? From most ancient times.
Well, they use it, I mean, we can say Sunday, but I don't think it's important which day it was. The sun god, worshiping the sun god. I think any day but the Sabbath would be, the devil wanted attention, and he said, I shall be like the Most High. The fourth commandment is the only one where God says, I created the heaven and earth. Right. If you take out the fourth commandment, you don't know who wrote them, really. That's true. Right? I mean, you don't know who the creator, anybody can say, I'm your God, well, I did this, but when someone says, I created you, oh, that makes a difference. Now, if you take that one out, you know, if you take that one out, now you're confused. Who really? So the devil doesn't want us worshiping God on his holy day, because it's a reminder that God gets all the alms and the praise and the glory. And so when you take out that fourth commandment, you take out that.
But it is interesting also that all through history is that Sunday has been the day of pagan worship, basically. And why? I mean, you know, we know that every one of God's rules and comments have been, what's the word, counterfeited. You know, for every truth there's a counterfeit.
Sure.
And certainly, so the devil has this. Yeah, you oftentimes have talked about the freedom of not smoking. I mean, you know, I was raised that smoking was a sin, I shouldn't do it, and so it was a negative thing for me. But really, it's positive.
No, it's a great
thing. I don't have all the consequences of the smoke in my body all those years.
Of course, yeah. So it's actually a blessing, and it's not a restriction.
Precisely, yeah.
And even in the eating, as you taught in your health programs, something like eating meats, and especially pork that the Bible designates, people say, well, that's that old law. I can eat pork if I want to in the New Testament, just as long as you give thanks and, you know, whatever. And it's, to me, like, why would I want to make an excuse for something that science now tells you is deadly to you? You know, that is terrible for you, is unhealthy for you. Why would I want to make an excuse to try to find out a way that it says it's okay for me to eat? God didn't give it just to be arbitrary and say, I'm going to put this nasty, dirty, or this beautiful, wonderful pig out here for you, and you have to look at him, you can't eat him. Just look what the pig does. Look at his life and what he does and what he represents. If in the fish, he's like the bottom feeder, the scavenger under the catfish. So God is saying, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you understand what's good for you and what's going to give you a longer, healthier life, and people want to fight it.
I was in Cambodia, living up in one of the villages in Cambodia during the crisis, and we were struggling for food, and we had white rice, and that was about most of what we had. Sometimes we had some chicken that had been not unrefrigerated for a week.
Wow.
But one night we came back from the clinics to our camp, and they were frying up some hamburgers. And we were hungry. I mean, really, really hungry. And
now you've been a vegetarian how long?
Oh, pretty much most of my life.
Okay.
But
well, now you're hungry and somebody's frying hamburgers.
Well, I'm not. I'm not so strict that I wouldn't eat it if it's served. But
yeah.
But when I found out they were pork, and we were starving, what do you do? I mean, not just hungry. We were starving.
What did you do?
Well, I certainly looked at them. No, I didn't eat them, because I believe that God can take care of us, and even in those kind of times, I could deal with that. But it was tempting, and I can understand where I understand temptation and how the devil works. And
we might disagree a little bit on something like that, and I think it's okay to disagree. My thing is, when I was over in Romania after communism fell, there were preachers coming in telling all these people over there, you need to be vegetarians. Well, I was a vegetarian, and I understand, I'll get to the pork, but the vegetarian, they were teaching them to be vegetarians. And I looked around, well, what other food do they have if they can't eat meat? Well, the health message to me is to eat what's best to keep you alive. Right. And so while maybe in the States where I've got all these options to eat all these wonderful vegetables and things, or where in Europe and a lot of different places, but if I'm out in the jungles or I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and that's what I have to eat, then that's what we're to eat. So I think that everything is there for a purpose. And I'm not going to say to somebody, if they're starving to death and they've been out for a month and there's nothing to eat and there's a pig by, that you shouldn't eat the pig. I understand what you're saying, but to me, God is setting up a precedence, a rule. If you eat one pig's probably not going to kill you. If you eat a pork sandwich. And I know we're talking about principles and probably not the best time to get into this, but I think we have to, looking at our viewers that's here once again, be a little bit logical on the end of it. If somebody's dying, because of lack of food, are you going to say, oh, don't do that, that's a sin, God's going to hold that against you?
And I have a similar situation in the city where we're Danny. I mean, people, you go to a grocery store down the street from where you live in the city, I mean, there is really a very select bunch of food that's available. Most stuff is refined and expensive and salty and not good for you. Fresh fruit is almost impossible to get in a lot of those places. I mean, so it's not a lot unlike that. And yes, I think one does the best they can under the situation.
And that's it. God knows the heart, and He knows what's best for you. And eating any sin over a period of time will destroy you.
That's right, yeah.
So it doesn't just have to be what you eat, just the physical part of it, but if I'm involved in whatever else that I know is bad for me spiritually or mentally, it will destroy me. And maybe that one, and my dad used to tell me, son, one smoke of a cigarette's not going to kill you, He said, if I find out you do it, I'll make you wish you were dead. I won't kill you. You'll make you wish you were dead, but he was trying to discourage us. But people can't usually do that one, because now you do another one, then it becomes addictive. And so you stay away from those things. And I think all we're trying to do, we don't want to get on a legalistic. I always tell people, the problem with church today, when I say church, I'm broadening that, right. Protestants, all of us, is legalism or liberalism. Yeah, we're either too liberal, or then we're over on this side, we're legalism. Oh, you did that, that's sin. And over here, you can do anything goes. And now I've added several other L's: legalism, lazyism, loose-tongueism. There's a number of L's that are downfall.
There's one other aspect of that, and Paul makes an issue that we have an example. We're an example to the world, and we do have a witness to stand up for. And so there are times when I think that is in itself is reason enough to control our conduct, but no, I agree with you. I have no argument with that.
All right, I want to center in. We've got only about 8 more minutes, if you can believe it. If somebody buys this book, in essence, what are we going to learn and what are we going to find out? What I noticed, there are lots of books out there on this topic, but most of them are defending, because most of the world says, oh, you don't have to keep it, so we all write books trying to defend the Sabbath. You don't do that. Tell me why.
Because everybody else is, I guess. but no, because I think that the Sabbath it's important. It's a gift from God. And I believe that as we come closer and closer to the end of time, that the Sabbath as a monument now becomes a test of loyalty. Mm-hmm. And what do we mean by loyalty? I mean, it was a time when we had a dog and a cat that were friends. They slept together, did everything together. Well, the cat had kittens. She had 4 little kittens. Mm-hmm. And she got run over by a car one day. So we had 4 little kittens and no mother. That dog went into where those kittens were, and they started nursing from her.
Really?
She couldn't give them milk. We had to keep them from a bottle. But she took care of those kittens like they were her own.
Wow.
This is loyalty. Mm-hmm. I've just been assigned or asked to serve as a power of attorney for a former patient. She died here a couple weeks ago, but a few years ago, a young lady met her, and they developed a relationship, and they became good friends. This young lady stayed with this patient in a nursing home for 3 or 4 weeks after she had brain surgery. And then when we found out there was nothing else to do for her, she was going to die, this lady took her home, to her home, and stayed with her 24 hours a day, nursing her, just meeting her needs until she died. To me, this is loyalty.
Yes.
And this is what the Sabbath is. The Sabbath is a test of this kind. Do we have this kind of love for God, that we will give Him everything we've got to be faithful? Mm-hmm. Wow. And we see loyalty in the soldiers that go to Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, this is loyalty to a nation. The Sabbath is our loyalty to God, I believe. And as we come closer and closer to the end of time, this is going to be the sign that separates, I believe, God's people from others. Mm-hmm.
So when we think about the Sabbath and viewers, I always think about our viewers around the world that are just tuning in. Are you talking about like keeping a Jewish Sabbath? In other words, do you say you can't drive on the Sabbath, you can't walk, you can't do certain things? What does the Sabbath mean to you when you're saying keep the Sabbath? Because many of us say, well, the only thing I've ever seen is all these legalism and these laws. How do you separate that? How do you take it from legalism to love?
Probably I need to use Jesus' example.
Okay.
I mean, Jesus was not a legalist, and of course that's why he was killed.
Okay.
But neither was he a liberal. I mean, he still loved the Sabbath, he still worshiped in the Sabbath, he still respected the Sabbath, and the Sabbath was a high day for him. It was a day of celebration with his God. Okay. And that's what Sabbath is for us, and anything we can do, I think. Some people bring the Sabbath in with candles on Friday evening. I mean, I think a lot of things like that can bring us, that help establish that loyalty and that love relationship that we have with God, that allows Him then to transform us and make us like Him. Okay. I mean, to me, that's what Sabbath is all about, is that part of that, bringing us to a place where He can make us loving people.
Oh, that's good. Let me close with this. We'll close, and I don't want to put your dress up. But let me close with this. The Sabbath to you, when Friday evening sundown comes to you for that 24-hour period, what does it mean to you on a personal basis? What do you and Avon do? What do you enjoy doing on the Sabbath, and why is it so special to you?
Sabbath evening has been special for my family for years. Friday evening. Avon makes a special dinner. I mean, she spends all day preparing for the Sabbath, and so we have a soup or something at Sabbath evening, but special that we don't have other days. And it's really neat. We've not really used candles that much, but some people do and get a blessing from it. But so Sabbath evening it's a quiet time to be together and with family, and we have worship and prayer, and of course today we watch television and 3BN and some of these and other programs that are really meaningful. I mean, I like the programs from India and foreign, the things that are doing around the world. I think it's neat to watch some of this stuff. Sabbath, we go to church and spend a Sabbath school and church service. I mean, I've taught Sabbath school lessons through the years, and it's certainly expanded my understanding of God to be there discussing the Sabbath every Sabbath school, and that's, I think, something that many of the church are missing. I mean, Sunday schools also do that, but I mean, I just think it's a great opportunity to study the Bible. Again, we have Sabbath dinner, and that's usually a special time, if it's not potluck at home, in the church at least, then at home too. So, and then in the afternoon you have time to walk and to get out into nature. And
enjoy nature, huh?
I mean, and of course we live in a pretty nice place where we are. So, and
You're out in the country.
We're out in the country, right? So we've got
sure.
lakes around us and stuff, and it's beautiful. So,
but what you're saying and what you've said to me as a busy physician over the years, for you to be able to take your mind totally away from all of this stuff and all the work and the business, and with not only your surgeon, but if you're a surgeon, that means you have employees, and then you've got billing, and you've got all kinds of, appointments, you've got all these things that's on your mind. So you literally kind of put that aside and come in Sabbath, so you bring it in the evening, and all of a sudden your mind, you start to relax, and you start to remember who God is.
Precisely.
And that you're here to worship. And that's what I found out about some of these going to, as I said, like Whitney Houston's funeral.
Right.
It hit me, man was not created to be worshiped.
Right.
We were created to worship. And if we can get that straight, that's going to take us a long ways in a relationship with the God. So the Sabbath is a reminder that we are created beings, created to worship a loving, creator God.
And even, getting back to Jesus, I mean, Jesus ministered on the Sabbath, he healed on the Sabbath, and in my profession I've had to do that. I mean,
sure,
a lot of Sabbaths we're spending in the operating room.
Right.
But the Spirit is still there.
Of course, yeah. And I would think much less of you if you said somebody needed emergency surgery and they needed work on, and you said, well, I'm sorry, this is Sabbath, I'm not going to help you. The Bible says it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So that's something, as a physician, you take that oath to for people, and thank you that you're willing to do that and say, okay, there's times I have to, I'm going to go do what I need to do.
Yeah, it's neat. I mean, it's just neat loving the Lord and serving the Lord.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited. I'm going to read this book myself. I'm one of these people with short attention span, so it's a small book. I can probably comprehend this one. It's only 60-some pages, but it's a beautiful book. It's a different perspective. You're not defending the Sabbath, but you're showing it as God's gift in time for His creation, that all of us need to come back to a loving God.
Danny, I would really like to see that book mass distributed and see what reaction it would have in the Christian world.
Okay.
I mean, I think that some would see it. I mean, I don't know, but I just think that it would be a neat thing to try.
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put your address up on the screen in just a moment. If people want to contact you, they can contact you if they have questions about it. They want to maybe talk about ways that they can mass, distribute it. But I know that Pacific Press, they should be able to probably get these at ABC stores, right? Adventist book centers around the country. And so what we'll do is we'll put up your address, and we'll put up Dr. Thompson's address. If you'd like to contact him, you may do so at this address.
If you would like to get a copy of Dr. Thompson's new book, God's Gift in Time, or if you'd like to receive one of his other books, then you can write to His Image Medical Mission Society, Post Office Box 1102, Williams Bay, Wisconsin 53191. That's His Image Medical Mission Society, Post Office Box 1102, Williams Bay, Wisconsin 53191. Or you can visit him online at aplaceofhealing.info. That's aplaceofhealing.info. Call or write to him today. He would love to hear from you.